Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and today we are back with more. A Testament of Hope, the speeches and writings of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Let's go ahead and hop into this. Some years ago, a famous novelist died. Among his papers was found a list of suggested plots for future stories, the most prominently underscored being this one. A widely separated family inherits a house in which they have to live together. This is the great problem of mankind. We have inherited a large house, a great world house, in which we have to live together, black and white, Easterner and Westerner, Gentile and Jew, Catholic and Protestant, Muslim and Hindu, a family unduly separated in ideas, culture, and interest, who, because we can never again live apart, must learn somehow to live with each other in peace. However deeply American Negroes are caught in the struggle to be at last at home in our homeland of the United States, we cannot ignore the larger world house in which we are also dwellers. Equality with whites will not solve the problem of either whites or Negroes. If it means equality in a world society stricken by poverty in a universe doomed to extinction by war. All inhabitants of the globe are now neighbors. This worldwide neighborhood has been brought into being largely as a result of the modern Gentile and technological revolutions. The world today is vastly different than the world of just 100 years ago. A century ago, Thomas Edison had not yet invented the incandescent lamp to bring light to many dark places in the earth. The Wright brothers had not yet invented that fascinating mechanical bird that would spread its gigantic wings across the sky and soon dwarf distance and place time at the service of man. Einstein had not yet challenged the theory of an axiom in the theory of relativity and not yet been posited. Human beings searching for a century ago, as now for better understanding, had no television, no radios, no telephones, and no motion pictures through which to communicate. Medical science had not yet discovered the wonder drugs to end many dread plagues and diseases 100 years ago. Military men had not yet developed the terrifying weapons of warfare that we know today. Not the bomber and airborne fortress raining down death, nor napalm, that burner of all things and flesh in its path. A century ago, there were no skyscraping buildings to kiss the stars and no gargantuan bridges to span the water. Science had not yet peered into the unfathomable ranges of interstellar space, nor had a penetrated oceanic depths. All these new inventions, these new ideas, um, these sometimes fascinating and sometimes frightening develops came later. Most of them have come within the past 60 years, sometimes with agonizing slowness, more characteristically with bewildering speed, but always with enormous significance for our future. The years ahead will see a continuation of the same dramatic developments. Physical science will carve new highways into the stratosphere, and In a few years, astronauts and cosmonauts will probably walk comfortably across the uncertain pathways of the moon. In 2 or 3 years, it will be possible because of the new supersonic jets to fly from New York to London in 2.5 hours. In the years ahead, medical science will greatly prolong the lives of men by finding a cure for cancer and deadly heart ailments. Automation and cybernation will make it possible for working people to have undreamt of amounts of leisure time. All this is a dazzling picture of the future. The workshop, the spacious rooms, the new decorations and architectural patterns of the large world house in which we are living, along with the scientific and the technological revolution. We have also witnessed a worldwide freedom revolution over the last few decades, and the present upsurge of the Negro people in the United States grows out of a deep and passionate determination to make freedom and equality a reality here and now. In one sense, the civil rights movement in the United States is a special American phenomenon which must be understood in the light of American history and dealt with in terms of the American situation. But on another and more important level, what is happening in the United States is a significant part of the world development. Are we live in a day, said the philosopher Albert North Whitehead, when civilization is shifting its basic outlook, a major turning point in history where the presuppositions on the society is structured are being analyzed, sharply challenged, and profoundly changed. What we are seeing now is a freedom explosion, the realization of an idea whose time has come, to use Victor Hugo's phrase. The deep rumbling of discontent that we hear in the thunder of disinherited masses rising from dungeons of oppression to the bright hills of freedom. In one majestic chorus, the rising masses are singing in the words of our freedom song, "Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Us Around." All over the world, like a fever, freedom is spreading in the widest liberation movement in its history. The great masses of people are self-determined. The great masses of people are determined to end the exploitation of their races and lands. They are awake and moving toward their goal like a tidal wave. You can hear them rumbling in every village street, on the docks, in the houses, among the students, in the churches, and at the political meetings. For several centuries, the direction of history flowed from the nations and the societies of Western Europe out into the rest of the world in conquest of various sorts. That period, the era of colonialism, is at an end. East is moving west. The earth is being redistributed. Yes, we are shifting our basic outlooks. These developments would not surprise any student of history. Oppressed people cannot remain oppressed forever. The yearning for freedom eventually manifests itself. The Bible tells the thrilling story of how Moses stood in Pharaoh's court centuries ago and cried, "Let my people go." This was an opening chapter in a continuing story. The present struggle in the United States is a later chapter in the same story. Something without has reminded him that it can be gained. Consciously or unconsciously, he has been caught up by the spirit of the times, and with his black brothers of Africa and his brown and yellow brothers in Asia, South America, and the Caribbean, the United States Negro is moving with a sense of great urgency toward the promised land of racial justice. Nothing could be more tragic than for men to live in these revolutionary times and fail to achieve the new attitudes and new mental outlooks that the new situation demands. In Washington Irving's familiar story of Rip Van Winkle, the one thing that we usually remember is that Rip slept 20 years, and that another important point, however, was that is almost always overlooked. It was a sign of the end in the little town of Hudson from which Rip departed and scaled the mountain for his long sleep. When he went up, he had the sign had a picture of King George III of England. When he came down 20 years later, the sign had a picture of George Washington. As he looked at the picture of the first president of the United States, Rip was confused, flustered, and lost. He knew not who Washington was. The most striking thing about this story is that Rip slept 20 years. But is not that Rip slept 20 years, but that he slept through a revolution that would alter the course of human history. One of the great liabilities of history is that all too many people fail to remain awake through great periods of social change. Every society has its protectors of the status quo and fraternities of the indifferent who are notorious for sleeping through revolutions. But today, our very survival depends on our ability to stay awake, to adjust to new ideas, to remain vigilant, and to face the challenge of change. The large house in which we live demands that we transform this worldwide neighborhood into a worldwide brotherhood. Together we must learn to live as brothers, or together we will be forced to perish as fools. We must work passionately and indefatigably to bridge the gulf between our scientific progress and our moral progress. One of the great problems of mankind is that we suffer from a poverty of the spirit which stands in glaring contrast to our scientific and technological abundance. The richer we have become materially, the poorer we have become morally and spiritually. Every man who lives in every man lives in two realms, the internal and the external. The internal is that realm of spiritual ends expressed in art, literature, morals, and religion. The external is that complex of devices, techniques, mechanisms, and instrumentalities by means of which we live. Our problem today is that we have allowed the internal to become lost in the external. We have allowed the means by which we live to outdistance the ends by which we live. So much of the modern life can be summarized so that suggestive phrase, or can be summarized in that suggestive phrase of Thoreau: improved means to an unimproved end. This is a serious predicament, the deep and haunting problem confronting modern man. Enlarged material powers spell enlarged peril if there is not proportionate growth of the soul. Then the internal The external of man's nature subjugates the internal. Dark storm clouds begin to storm. Western civilization is particularly vulnerable at the moment, for our material abundance has brought us neither peace of mind nor serenity of spirit. An Asian writer has portrayed our dilemma in candid terms. You call your thousand material devices labor saving machinery, yet you are forever busy. With the multiplying of your machinery, you grow increasingly fatigued, anxious, nervous, dissatisfied. Whatever you have, you want more, and wherever you are, you want to go somewhere else. Your devices are neither time saving nor soul saving machinery. They are so many sharp spurs which urge you on to invent more machinery and to do more business. This tells us something about our civilization that cannot be cast aside as a prejudice charged by an Eastern thinker who is jealous of Western prosperity. We cannot escape the indictment. This does not mean that we must turn back and clock or turn back the clock of scientific progress. No one can overlook the wonders that science has wrought for our lives. The automobile will not abdicate in favor of the horse and buggy, or the train in favor of the stagecoach, or the tractor in favor of the hand plow, or the scientific method in favor of the ignorance and superstition. But our moral and spiritual lag must be redeemed. The scientific power outruns our moral power. We end up with guided missiles and misguided men. When we foolishly minimize the internal of our lives and maximize the external, we sign the warrant for our own day of doom. Our hope for creative living in this world house that we have inherited, lies in the ability to reestablish the moral ends of our lives in personal character and social justice. Without this spiritual and moral reawakening, we shall destroy ourselves in the misuse of our own instruments. So, yeah, Dr. King talking about the need of a moral and spiritual compass. We are advancing as a society, as a people, but spiritually, morally, he feels that we are not, because when he quoted the Eastern thinker, we have developed all these things, but yet we are still busy, still itching to go elsewhere. And honestly, I don't think that is anything to do with a moral or spiritual failing. Some people just have an itch that they can't scratch to proceed, to go further, to go beyond what they have before. It For some people it just is. That's what drives them. That's my personal thought on the matter, but yeah. But that'll be it for this episode. As always, educate thyself, think, read, study, learn. Someone tries to tell you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. See you all in the next episode. Until then, later.